constantly hot.
Oh, they are.
Press the button to. So we're live.
We are live.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chandler. I'm Jennifer Boysko. I'm the acting chair of the Broadband Advisory Council. If you would call, call the roll.
Yes, ma'am. Delegate Leftwich. Present. Delegate Wright. Delegate Reed. Senator Boysko.
Here.
Senator Hashmi.
Here.
Senator Lewis. Steve Sandy. Ray Lemura.
Here.
Casey Logan.
Here.
Rich Schulman.
Here.
Jimmy Carr.
Here.
Christian Goodwin. Christy Proctor.
Here.
Secretary Merrick or representative. And Beth Green in place of Secretary Lohr.
Here.
Thank you. Quorum is present, Madam Chair.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from our December 8th meeting? Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes from December 8th, 2023? Aye. Hearing no opposition, minutes are accepted. Today we've gotten together to listen to legislative concepts that are coming towards the bills that we expect to see. We will have a few minutes to hear from any of the patrons who might have a bill in front of us this year. This is not actually considering whether or not we're going to pass them or not. It is just an additional meeting, and we will have the opportunity for the Office of the Broadband staff to give us an additional update about what their work is going on, and then we will have opportunity for public comments. We've got a brand new General Assembly. Approximately half of the Senate is brand new, and about a third of the House is brand new. So we want to make sure that everybody has the information that they are going to need as we move forward. This is intended to be an educational and informational meeting. And so with that, I know that there are members present here in the audience who might have a bill in front of us. I know Senator Marsden has a bill. And just before we get started, are there others in the audience who are patrons of bills that will be before the General Assembly? I see only Senator Marsden. So if you would like Senator Marsden to come and give us a quick preview of the bill that you're going to be carrying, and members here can ask questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. You know, in this modern world, it's even a problem and difficult to sort out the problems of spending a couple of $1 billion. I think that used to be a lot easier when I was growing up. But, you know, the Commonwealth of Virginia, our Virginia localities and private broadband companies have made significant investments in broadband, $2 billion. It's a huge sum of money. We've invested the need to be, and we need to spend this money by the end of 2026, or it's clawed back and turned back into the federal government. You know, we have in localities in the state, you know, we have benefited certainly from federal dollars coming down throughout the pandemic, but that's going away. And they want to make sure the federal government has its obligations, obviously, that they want the money that they've invested in states to get these important things done, that they're done on time and they're done appropriately. And that is significant. So utility make-ready delays in getting these basically these poles ready for attachments from the attachers to get broadband to people, you know, they jeopardize our VATI timelines and could result in projects being significantly pared back to meet these timelines. We can't have that. Investor-owned utilities, Dominion, AEP, have clear federal rules and on make-ready cost allocations and timelines, but our electric cooperatives do not. You know, they still operate under the direction of the SCC and certain other industry standards. If a utility pole does not meet the current electric safety standards, replacing the pole is not necessitated by the new broadband attachment. Some electric cooperatives are using discretion to attempt to shift significant amounts of deferred maintenance to the broadband projects. You know, everybody's different in terms of how proactive they are on replacing their poles. And in some places, it has gotten to a point where if it comes down, that's when you replace it. Just don't have the money to keep to invest in doing that. You have fewer fewer customers, if you will, per mile, and it is expensive, and I understand that. With the cooperatives. We desperately need to ensure every Virginian has access to the internet and address any challenges getting in the way. Just like the General Assembly addressed railroads holding up broadband last session, Make Ready needs to be addressed. We cannot afford to be sending this money back. And as a matter of fact, if we can do this efficiently enough, there'll be, from what my understanding is from the industry, is that there'll be money left over, several $100 million perhaps, to invest in other internet-related activity, training, education, whatever. We all went through the period of time in the pandemic, and this panel knows it better than me, where families had to drive their child to the local library so they could hook up to the internet in the car. That's just unacceptable. And I want Virginia, and I think all of us want Virginia to be a leader in this area and not just a follower. My bill would standardize make-ready rules and timelines throughout Virginia by requiring the electric co-ops to follow the same rules that the investor-owned utilities already follow. This won't raise electric rates necessarily. Some electric cooperatives already follow these rules, and large-scale broadband deployment in cooperative territory have already happened in Virginia without raising rates. This won't jeopardize safety. This is the same argument we heard from the railroads. The National Electric Safety Code, which Dominion and AEP already follow, would still govern make-ready standards. There's a large coalition of supporters for this bill. The VCTA, Virginia Broadband Industry Association, the Virginia Association of Counties, Virginia Rural Health Association, and the Coalition of Small and Rural Schools. We have to get this done, folks. And we know a change creates difficulty on folks and creates challenges for us all. But the goal here is to put Virginia in a situation where we have broadband out to everybody. If we're ever going to have economic parity in this Commonwealth between our rural and our urban and suburban areas, access to information is critical in making that happen. We have to get this done. And Madam Chair, I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Senator, for giving us a brief overview of the bill that you have. I think everybody in this room agrees that we've got to use this money effectively, that we don't want it to be clawed back from the federal government. And I think we just all have to work to decide how we're gonna make that happen. Are there questions from members of the Broadband Advisory Council?
Yes, Madam Chair. Senator Morrison, first of all, what are we trying to solve with the bill itself? Is this a cost issue? What are we trying to solve?
I think you're trying to make the rules clear on cost. In terms of that, there's reasonable costs that certainly the attachers, can pay for some necessary improvements to poles. And there are other situations where we don't want to just having them have to pay for deferred maintenance that would have had to take place, because poles have long past their full depreciation and what have you. So it's a question of arriving at a fair solution to this, and we're working on it. I've been meeting with the cooperatives and their representatives. I've met with the investor-owned utilities and their representatives. I've put the attachers and the cooperatives in the same room, point counterpoint, to try to get a better understanding. And the bill is still in a posture where we're trying to work at solving the problems that folks have. But at the end of the day, the goal here is broadband for everybody. We cannot afford to not let that happen, but we are trying to make the accommodations that we can. But there's not that we can't accommodate everybody. There will always be some folks who may be unhappy with the final result, but we have to get this done.
We currently have a system in place that allows ISPs to go to the State Corporation Commission if there's any disputes between the two parties. Has any ISP who's bringing this up went to the SEC and followed that route?
Well, certainly we can sit around and go to court and go to the SEC and get this thing moving, or we can get a bill through to get this done. We're on a timeline, folks. This isn't something that we can wait forever on. We need action, I think, during this General Assembly session, and need to get it going. And hopefully this we'll come up with a bill here that will resolve all the issues, and we can move forward expeditiously, get this timeline met, not have this money clawed back, and have actually additional resources at the end of it to spend on other things. important to everybody sitting at this table.
Yeah, I got some more, if that's
Other
okay.
question?
Madam
Certainly,
Chair.
go ahead.
I saw a Cardinal News article, Senator, that said that, Dominion and APCO are both experienced make-ready delays. So it's a time issue. Agreed, you want to
Mhm.
make sure everybody gets it in a timely fashion before the money runs out. But yet the bill specifically does not include Dominion and APCO. It points to the FCC rules that they're currently following, but yet there's still delays on their system.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand how carving them out of this legislation provides any benefits if there are delays across the state.
Well, they're already under the federal requirements. And we need everybody, Dominion, AEP, the cooperatives, doing everything we can to communicate well with each other, get information about the polls and what these polls need to have happen to them to be able to attach. And I've met with Dominion and AEP too, and I recognize the fact that they have work to do as well. But this bill predominantly deals with, the cooperatives are the ones who represent the majority. I think that might be an overstatement. The majority of people in this state that don't have broadband, and that's who we're trying to get at here. These rural folks who, for years, it's been a dream to be able to get this. And we're still working on the bill. We're still working with with the attachers, with the cooperatives, with Dominion, with AEP. We're going to try to get this in the best possible posture it can be.
Okay, so mentioning the AEP and Dominion, they do have the federal regulations. What specifically out of that do you want to apply to electric cooperatives? What specifically out of the federal regulations do you want to apply to the electric cooperatives?
Well, I think we'd like to see them, under the same rules for the whole idea of safety and reliability and getting these internet attachments to people. And it's complicated. This is not an easy lift. Getting at this and what have you. I understand electric cooperatives were created for an entirely different purpose other than having poles for other people to attach to. They were there when the big power companies would not come to rural areas to provide electricity, so the cooperatives came into place. And their situation, now is and obviously I don't know what Dominion or AEP or anyone else would say, but it is difficult being a cooperative, being on such a small scale to be able to meet some of the obligations, but those obligations have to be met.
Okay, and meeting those obligations, Senator, costs are going to shift to rural ratepayers. Is that intent? Is that the intent of the bill?
It does not appear to be happening in most of the cooperatives. There are some who feel that it's going to happen, but we need to let this play out and see what the issues are. But most of the cooperatives are meeting the standards that we need them to meet and the costs that we need them to meet, and things are moving along well. We still have some timeline issues, but I think we still have the time to get this done. But we need to get this resolved if we're going to meet that timeline.
I got a
Any other
question. Yeah, for DHCD staff, if you don't mind.
Ed,
I want to make sure, the facts are correct here, but when we granted VATI dollars, state funded dollars, to ISPs for broadband development, were those costs intended to cover all costs associated with the project, including make-ready work?
Dr. Holmes?
I'll wait.
So when we receive applications, some of the projects do include costs for make ready. It just depends on the nature of the ISP that's submitting the application in partnership with the locality. We do cover a portion, of course, any project where, for example, if it was a tower and maybe part of the tower might be leased for cellular service, we would cover a portion. And so we would distinguish what portion of the project is solely related to the deployment of broadband versus, maybe an additional use of an asset that would be deployed. And so it just really depends on the application that's submitted by the provider, whether they include that as cost on our side of the budget or the cost in terms of match.
But the award intent of the award is once it was awarded, that would cover all costs for
If-
deploying broadband in that geographical area.
Well, we cover up to 80%.
Well, that's correct. I
depending
mean,
on
the contract itself, though,
Yes.
was included in all costs.
Yes, whatever budget was submitted, whatever project was approved, whatever the line items were, we would approve fully.
Okay.
prior, and we would, if there needs to be adjustments, we will make that before a contract is issued.
Any further questions?
Just one more.
Okay.
Just one more.
Go ahead.
Just read something very interesting last night. The U.S. Telecom, the National Trade Association that represents Shentel, Verizon, Lumos, Brightspeed, and some of the other companies represented in the room today, put out an issue brief stating that these kinds of cost shifts, we're talking about cost shifts from ISPs to utilities, fundamentally undermined rural broadband programs at the federal level. They said that paying for poles is the normal cost of doing business. Why are these companies now seeking this sort of policy at the state level? Aren't you concerned that it is undermining batting through this cost shifting?
Well, I wouldn't exactly call it a cost shift. I would call it a fact that we all need to meet our responsibilities. It's more difficult for some than others. There's probably no question of that, but it isn't a question of cost shifting. It's a question of cost responsibility. And a lot of our co-ops are meeting their responsibilities.
Are there other members of the advisory council that'd like to ask a question?
Just quick, thank you, Senator. Did you mention a Senate bill? Has this actually been filed yet?
I'm sorry?
Is there an actual number for this bill?
No, there is not. We're still working, working on this bill to get it right. And I would imagine we'll be working on it through the process once it's filed. That's what we do. And because, I'm putting a lot of effort into this, and so are the wonderful people I'm meeting with who all have legitimate, concerns and interests and what have you. But remember, at 35,000 feet, we can't fail. We cannot fail to get broadband to every citizen in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's critical for them, their futures as individuals, and our Commonwealth's economy.
Yeah. Delegate.
Yes, thank you, Senator Marston. So I was interested in this conversation about cost shifting. And from my understanding, it's not necessarily a matter of cost shifting, but it's a matter of what additional load is being put on that pole based upon the attachment of broadband. You want to address that?
Your question exactly? I'm sorry.
So help me understand the difference between, so I don't view this from what I've been in my discussions, I've not understood this to be a matter of necessarily cost shifting. And you talked about responsibility for the poles and their ability to handle current load versus additional load based upon adding broadband to it. So in other words, my understanding is a lot of these poles wouldn't meet federal standards anyway. And the cooperatives are trying to make the ISPs bring their poles up to current standards, plus handle the additional load. That's what I've been told.
We are attempting to come up with really understandable rules as to whose responsibility, is what. We have some of these poles years and years since they've fully depreciated and are way beyond what would be considered their natural lifetime. And they're still standing, vulnerable to storms and the distance between poles and what have you, and some deferred maintenance issues have not been dealt with properly. So, there is, money with the ISPs to do pay for certain work on poles to make them appropriate, but, we can't expect the ISPs and the federal dollars to go to replace every deficient or neglected pole in the Commonwealth of Virginia, because people have not kept up with what it is they need to do. But I understand their concerns, and we're trying to work through that.
But that's the rub. That's the rub. That's the pushback.
Yeah.
That's the problem that's preventing the deployment.
Yeah, the legislative process is all about the rubs, and it is. These are not simple issues. I wouldn't be standing here today if this was a simple issue. But we're still working on it, and that's my goal, and that's what I want to tell this commission that I'm there to do.
Yes,
staff,
Delegate.
then I'd like to maybe ask Senator Marston.
That would be fine, Delegate. Go
So
ahead.
for staff, when the VATI grants are approved, is it anticipated that the grant would cover bringing these poles up to current standards, or is it issued or granted based upon just being able to handle the additional load that the deployment of broadband would cause?
In the application, we require information about if conversations have been had between the pole owner and the attacher. It would be unusual if you received that level of detail about, individual poles, what's been expected, but, applications and application budgets rely on the communication between private sector entities that are going to have to be involved in the process in the same way that a body, a co-applicant broadband provider would talk to VDOT in that application window.
Okay, all right, that is also that line of questioning, but one additional question. Are municipal cooperatives included, captured in the electric cooperatives that would be covered under your bill?
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Municipal cooperative electrical.
I'm not really sure on that issue. That is not something that's come up in in our conversations. But as we all know, in this, whether you're a municipal co-op or a rural co-op or whatever, once those attachments are made, that'll be ongoing income, the rental that will be paid for by the broadband companies to the co-ops, to the investor-owned utilities, to everybody. They're going to benefit, from that. And we're trying to work out the bumps in this thing, but clearly, we know what our goal is, and but there is a revenue stream created, for these co-ops, by the attachments to the broadband companies, and that's up to private negotiation as to how much those are. But there are benefits here to the co-ops. Get these poles in place so that we can get a fair division of responsibility financially for these poles. That's what we're working on.
Just a comment. I don't know whether this data exists now, but it'd be instructive to know what type of expenses are trying to be passed to the ISPs by the various co-ops, so we kind of get a flavor for what where the trouble lies. That may come from the ISPs, and I don't know whether the commission has that at their fingertips or not.
That data would be in remittance requests from grantees. We would have to go back and do some evaluation and research, but that's going to be, in the reporting process. When a grantee requests dollars from state accounts, we review the remittance request, see what those dollars are being requested for, that it's consistent with the budget, and then approve that remittance. So that's where that data would be.
Okay.
Which would be post-construction because these are reimbursements.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there other members of the committee who have questions before I ask my questions? Okay, so Senator Marston, I'm wondering if you have a ballpark range of how much a pole replacement costs, or a pole replacement, the cost of this to either the ISP or to the.
In rural areas, I've seen some people paying $10,000 a mile, I'm told. Others $28,000.
For a pole?
For
the individual pole, not
for individual,
the
for the cost of the poles, the attachments, what have you. I mean, it's ranging all over the place, and we're trying to get I'm trying to get a handle on just what's appropriate here, because what I don't want to see happen is all the deferred maintenance going on, being paid for by the people who are coming in doing attachers. I want the attachers to pay their fair share of what it is. But if you've got a 60-year-old pole, I don't think it's maybe appropriate that they're replacing that pole. But if they need to pay for an additional height or some attachment thing, and it's complicated because different attachers attach differently to poles. They all have their own way of doing things. So it's not a straightforward issue. And we'll be working on this throughout the session to try to get it and bring all these variables into play to come up with something that's fair. But remember, we're only having a problem in a few areas here. Most of the state is we think can make the timelines, and we just want to make sure that we don't have money clawed back by the federal government, because in some with some of the smaller co-ops that there's not a common understanding and a common agreement as to how things go. And if you change the engineering standards, through this thing as to how you're going to attach, that can delay the project. And we're just trying to eliminate those things from occurring so that the attachers can get moving and identify the poles they need to get information on, and then go in and get it done.
What, I have another question for you. We talked about depreciation of the poles. Do you have the information of exactly when a pole is, beyond its current lifespan and how we determine whether or not they're in compliance? I think that's a big question for a lot of folks.
Yeah, depreciation is a date that is, selected. And there are some places, if you're for instance, in a swampy, wet area, you may not make it to the end of your depreciation before that pole needs to be replaced. But if you're in a high and dry and what have you, that pole may be valid for a number of years past depreciation. The bill, it is trying to deal with, what is appropriate based on the condition of the poles and not just arbitrary numbers.
Thank you very much.
I got one thing,
Go ahead,
just because we got on some technical stuff here, and I just think it's need to be brought out that when we look at depreciation of a pole, it's like a used car. Just because a car is depreciated, the car still runs, it still works. Electric cooperatives are stringently audited by the RUS, the federal government, to meet pole replacement guidelines, to meet inspection guidelines. So any pole that is currently out there is doing its job. I want to make clear that we don't think that we just have poles out there we're going to fall over if a bird lands on it. And the second part of that would be, when we look at the cost of pole replacement, I think we need to be very careful when we look at a pole replacement cost on the Eastern Shore where there's sand in the ground. And then you look at a pole replacement around, Western Virginia in the mountains. We're talking totally different numbers here. And those costs will be pushed back on the local ratepayers. And it's significant. It's going to be a huge discrepancy between where you're located in the state and the cost of that make ready. It just costs more to deploy broadband in certain areas than it does somewhere else. And that's why it hadn't been done yet. But I just think we need to be very conscious of that.
Yeah. And Madam Chair, many of the cooperatives working in these same areas are doing just fine with getting this done. Others are struggling. We're just trying to deal with that reality.
I appreciate that. I think that we are really the first in the one of the first in the nations to be dealing with this and trying to solve the problem. We happen to with the federal funds that we've gotten in. So we're working to try to make sure that we are using our funds appropriately, effectively, responsibly, getting broadband to as many people as possible. I do think there is still a question of what if body funds would or BEAD money would be able to pay for some of these replacements that are necessary. I understand that attachments would definitely go under it, but if we can get some clarification, I think from the folks on the technical side, I think that would be really helpful. I can remember in 2018 being at a broadband conference in Colorado and with some of the people who were in the room here, and the conversation of pole attachments was a hot topic. And I know it's been something that we've been dealing with for years and years before that, but I know that this is a hard issue to solve. I appreciate you're willing to come up and try to bring your approach, and appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the work of this commission. It's important work that you're doing, and we can get this done.
Thank you so much, Senator Marsden. I also understand that Delegate Fagans is on the line remotely, and he has a bill that he has introduced already. Delegate Fagans, are you available to share your bill content with us?
Hi, Delegate Fagans is on the road right now.
Okay.
We're just in here listening for him.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So if there are any other legislators who have bills that will come before the General Assembly dealing with broadband, this would be your opportunity to talk. And if we do not, then we will go on to our office staff for the broadband update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have brief verbal updates on a couple of different areas. Firstly, the BEAD program, of course, as we updated the Broadband Advisory Council at the last meeting, we're waiting on approval of Volume 2 of our BEAD initial proposal. That's our guidelines and process for administering subawards. We're waiting on NTIA approval there, and have been having a lot of conversations with them on the item of a low-cost plan and the requirement of a low-cost plan under the BEAD program. The challenge process, we're moving forward under that. This was brought up during the last council meeting. Initially, 266,000 challenges received. That's all about making sure that the bead maps are as accurate as possible, because if we miss somebody under bead and then don't get to them under body, somebody's going to raise their hand 2 or 3 years down the road and say, hey, I'm not included in one of these projects. What can you do for me? So mapping is critical. We're working through those challenges. We just cleared the first round of review. Now we're doing what's called generating area challenges to look in and zoom into areas that had a lot of challenges submitted in that one census block group. So that's the next phase there. Of course, we're navigating bead guidance, and as you noted earlier, in terms of seeking clarification on the make ready and pole attachment, allowable costs under bead. That guidance is ever evolving, and verbally and in writing. So we're making sure that we can keep an eye on that as it changes, and we'll seek clarification on that front. The Virginia Telecommunication Initiative applications closed on in late December, and I've got an update here about the number of applications received. 25 applications. Proposing to serve 61,187 total locations. That includes 44 different counties and cities across the Commonwealth. It requests $178 million, and the total matching funds to that $178 million would be $201 million and change. If we were, of course, able to award all those, that's just the application statistics, and a little over $40 million available for body 2024 this year. Lastly, rounding out those updates, we have guidelines on the street now for public comment under the service territory data collection process. The guidelines are bringing in our collection process and modeled after what the federal data is submitted. So it should streamline that for broadband providers, allow us to map the same data with the same base layer, and then clearly communicate project areas as well. Right now, we have polygons that folks can go and look online to see if they're included in projects. This will allow folks to zoom to the location level, see if they have broadband coverage and from who, and if they're in projects from the body program or federally or otherwise. Line extension program guidelines should be coming up soon for public comment. So we'll wait there and announce that public comment opportunity when those guidelines have been released. And the Virginia Digital Opportunity Plan that we discussed at the last meeting has been submitted. That's also available online now in the as submitted version that folks can go and check out. Critical work by our team, and helping especially see what the needs are around BEAD non-deployment dollars in the regions or the areas of broadband affordability and adoption. Also want to recognize we have an intern joining us for the first time today, Kayla Bravo in the back. She's joining our team from Virginia Commonwealth University. Glad to have her on board, focusing on broadband affordability and adoption specifically. So Kayla, feel free to say hi to Kayla later. She's got a lot going on and a lot of important work that we'll be doing and Kayla will be doing over the next couple of months. Samara, is there anything?
Kayla.
That concludes the update.
Thank you so much. You all are doing such important work. It's always impressive to hear your updates. I'm really, really proud of our team here in Virginia. The next item on the agenda would be public comment. And I know that we have people probably online, but we'll allow 3 minutes comment per individual in person first. And is there a list of,
Yes, ma'am.
of folks? So if you'd call on them, Chandler.
Gladly. The first signed up for public comment, we have Gary Wood.
Well, thank you for all the work you're doing, and particularly DHCD staff. I'm Gary Wood. I'm CEO at Central Virginia Electric Co-op and Firefly Fiber Broadband. I understand the co-op side of pole attachments, and I understand the attacher side as Firefly, who's working on a project where we're attaching to Rappahannock electric poles and Appalachian power poles. This bill, first of all, let me touch real quickly on this term of deferred maintenance. There is no deferred maintenance. None. Co-ops maintain poles every day. I get so tired of folks, that's a derogatory term to us, that we have somehow deferred and let things deteriorate. That is wrong. I'm going to ask folks one more time to please stop using that term. Now let me get the cost shifting. If our projects, we're going to end up in front of about 90,000 homes. If our projects were built under this bill, we would have $10 million annually in additional profits. That's for a company that's got a business model that on $50 million revenue will have $2.5 million in annual profits. We're real thin margin. We're a rural service-oriented company. owned by a not-for-profit. We don't have to deliver big margins, but that is the difference that this would make. This pole attachments that's not a new concept. We've been doing it. The electric co-op, my co-op's been in business 87 years. Been doing pole attachments ever since. There is a way to handle them. When you change that, that is a cost shift. This bill has no cap. And if you take Southside Electric Co-op, serves some of the poorest and most rural areas, 8,400 miles of line. If half of their line has to be rebuilt under this, that can cost up to $400 million for that co-op. That's a 50% rate increase. No one has been able to tell me, oh, wait, that won't happen because here's how that bill prevents it. There's no cost associated yet. There's no analysis. You can't put a bill like this out and say, well, we hope bad things don't happen. We intend good things to happen. You need to look at this really carefully and not open Pandora's box. So it is a cost shift. It will have a negative impact. It takes away all economic decision-making from the attachers as to whether or not they should go underground or overhead, because all make-ready is free. And when all make-ready is free, the decisions change significantly. And it's going to impact rural ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next signed up for public comment, John Hua. On deck, Chris Boczelinski.
Good morning, council members. I'm John Hua, the president and CEO at Rappahannock Electric Cooperative, and I'd like to address the proposed bill regarding Make Ready. REC serves portions of 22 Virginia counties with 18,000 miles of power lines. I concur with Gary's comments previously about deferred maintenance. There is none. We inspect each and every one of our overhead structures as well as our entire grid on a rigid rotational basis using nationally qualified third parties to inspect ground line and boring for core boring for wood pole structures. In addition to that, Rappahannock is probably one of the few utilities in the nation that is now using a comprehensive system-wide drone close range inspection overhead flyover that uses LiDAR, uses infrared technologies, advanced optics, and others. Our grid is extremely well maintained, is providing great service to our membership, and it is performing the job reliably on days such as today in the stormy conditions. With respect to pole attachments and our work regarding Make Ready, today REC has over 65,000 pole attachments already active in place on our grid. We've worked with 15 to 17 providers from local to national scale over decades to accommodate and to leverage the grid so that REC's assets are made available to telecommunications provider so that we can do more than our share for furthering rural broadband. When it comes to fiber and broadband specifically, thank you for all of you that have taken part in appropriating the funds to make available for this rapid deployment of broadband across our region. Today, we're constructing a fiber backbone network that is traversing 820 miles through many of our communities that is available for fiber leasing. We have multiple entities already leasing fiber. That project has 13 dedicated crews. These are 5-person crews that I'm speaking of for its construction. As Mr. Wood mentioned, we're working closely with Firefly Broadband in 5 counties that REC serves electrically. We have 18 fully dedicated make-ready crews, 18 5-person fully dedicated make-ready crews. That project is moving along swimmingly. We have thousands of poles that are in place to be replaced. We have already replaced between 3,700 and 4,000 poles. We are hundreds of miles into the make-ready, and broadband customers, REC's members, are being connected to the Firefly broadband. Now, at the same time, we're experiencing other ISPs. While we are working extremely well with many ISPs, we're experiencing other or a few or an ISP that is just simply not making progress during this same time frame. I cannot explain all of the reasons that one ISP moves forward, meeting their project deadlines and milestones, and another does not. But I will just say that Rappahannock stands ready to expand our army of 200 or more current resources, FTEs, and contractors combined. That is an incredible contribution by our co-op to step forward to enable rural broadband. We stand ready to increase that army. Now, with respect to the proposed bill, it absolutely does not fix timing. Yes, ma'am. Yes, it does not fix timing, and it does not. It definitely shifts cost to rural cooperative ratepayers. One serious, very, very serious implication of the bill.
Thank you for your
yes, ma'am. Thank you.
3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Ahern after Chris. Go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. My name is Chris Bochelinski. I'm Chief Operating Officer of Bark Electric and the subsidiary Bark Connects, operating out of Rockbridge, Bath, parts of Allegheny, and Highland and Augusta County. When Mr. Logan mentioned there's a big difference between building in the coastline compared to building in the mountains, I'm the latter. I'm the one that building in the mountains, punching through rock to set a pole. So Bark has applied for, but not received VADI grants in the last several rounds on there. Basically due to our proposed cost, and it's too high is where it comes down to when you look at the economic analysis. This left large areas of the Highland regions without funding for broadband. Part of why our proposed costs were so high was because we exercised proper due diligence when we assessed the cost of make-ready work in our unique territory. Once again, it's not the same as other parts of Virginia. So the VADI grants are included to cover these costs as stated previously, and we didn't receive them because of our projected make-ready costs are so high. The ISP supporting this proposed legislation, they receive awards because their proposed costs were lower than ours. We know the ISPs want to be responsible and pay their fair share. It just turns out that their fair share is much larger than they thought. And they underbid the cost for their VADI grants in these multiple rural areas. We all want to be good stewards of the public money and deploy broadband in the most cost-effective way, but it completely undermines the VADI program to allow grant recipients to push costs onto electric utility ratepayers. We urge you to oppose the proposed legislation and instead pursue alternative solutions to any budgeting shortfalls faced by VADI recipients and reevaluate VADI applicants rejected primarily on the cost basis under these revised guidelines. Thank you.
Jeff Ahern. Next up after Mr. Ahern is Jason Carter.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, council members. My name is Jeff Ahern. I'm CEO of Craig Botetourt Electric Cooperative. We are one of 13 cooperatives in the state. We are the smallest cooperative in the state. We serve the rural parts of Roanoke County, Botetourt, Craig, Montgomery, Giles, and Allegheny counties. We're roughly 91% residential, have about 1,215 miles of line, roughly 18,428 poles. Being one of 13 cooperatives in the state, the 13 are differently situated companies and vary in size and geographical traits and service territories. At Craig Botetourt, we have 24 employees. We range between 24 to 26, depends on the month, but we do vary with our staff. So we're very small. We have about 6,800 members, 7,200 accounts in rural sections of these counties. Our mountainous area contains a large portion of area that's owned by the National Forest, Virginia Department of Forestry, and the Appalachian Trail. So this area is not down the roadway. It's double-sided right-of-way. Very hard to get accessibility to those areas. The FCC regulations, which it is my understanding that this proposed legislation is modeled after, is designed for large multi-state utilities that provide consistency and simply do not work for small local utilities. In fact, the federal government explicitly carved out cooperatives when they were instituted in the FCC policies. They recognize that one size doesn't fit all approach just doesn't work for all. Treating cooperatives like investor-owned utilities that have staff of thousands versus hundreds, or in my case, tens of employees becomes problematic. Even though we are small, we spend an extraordinary amount on operating budget for pole maintenance and right-of-way maintenance. To ensure that our system is reliable, we test every pole for its health and strength, because safety of our members and the public is priority number one. And we do a 7-year rotation on our pole inspections. It's a comprehensive pole inspection. And we also treat poles that have some decay and that is recapitalized also. So these poles are treated and are inspected. We are deeply concerned about this legislation, which would pass costs to our members and would not be forced, and they would be forced to foot the bill. They already have paid for our poles and wires in
you.
the rates once. This bill is double dipping in the pockets of those that can least afford it.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
y'all.
Thank you.
Next, Jason Carter. After Jason, Ron White.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Jason Carter, Vice President, Shenandoah Valley Electric Cooperative, External and Member Relations. Appreciate the opportunity. I'll be brief this morning. Senator Marsden said that in relation to his bill that legislation addresses RUBS. It's our belief and our experience that contracts also address RUBS. We have strong contracts with the ISPs that are both awardees of VATI grants as well as those that are continuing to install fiber broadband in the Shenandoah Valley without the VATI process. Attachments is something that we have decades of experience with, and these contracts that we have with ISPs for decades have addressed the issues that are highlighted in this bill. The legislation would circumvent the contract process that we have in place. The contracts are in keeping with SEC regulation and expectation for consumer protection. That's the part of the mission of a cooperative, in addition to reliability, is our nonprofit consumer protection of our members. Those are contemplated in the contracts that memorialize decades of attachment experience through a well-managed process that's completely understood by the utility and the attacher when those contracts are executed. That review process includes the make ready and the construction phases. They're a shared responsibility between the utility and the ISP so that there's a clear understanding for standardization of design and the expectations for alterations to poles that do more than support reliability, which is our #1 mission. So the idea of cost sharing and responsibility is a well thought out process. It's tackled, again, with decades of experience, and utilities fully recognize their responsibility to maintain their infrastructure and make sure that that is highlighted and very clear in those contracts so that when ISPs seek to utilize space on the poles, they understand that alterations that may require changes that don't affect reliability go back to the expectations of both our members and the State Corporation Commission and how we structure those agreements.
Thank you so much.
Ron White, next up after Ron, Kyle Allwine.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for giving me this time this morning. My name is Ron White, and I am here on behalf of Southside Electric Cooperative. The electric cooperative family, the safety and reliability is the very foundation of what we are. And this proposed bill gives concerns for safety and reliability impacts, and this draft legislation brings those concerns to the forefront. In this draft legislation, we have seen that the bill applies federal FCC regulations to be enforced at the state level. If enacted, this language permits ISPs to overlash fiber attachments to utility poles and wires without prior review by the utility. Overlashing is a practice when an attacher can wrap new sets of wires around an existing attachment without any safety inspections or prior notifications to the utility. For us at SCC in particularly, this is a grave concern. In 2021, our territory was hit by a devastating ice storm in which it left 60% of our utility system on the ground. The damage from the storm was devastating, and the restoration took a tremendous amount of time and money. Our system was and still is rated at the highest possible standard for ice to ensure that we can withstand heavy storms, and yet, even so, this storm was devastating to our region and our members. If this bill were to pass, the ISPs could overlash without the utility's review or permission. Fiber is glass, and as we know that it is heavy. Adding this extra weight to our poles without review makes them more vulnerable to damage from not just ice storms, but wind, snow, rain, and falling branches. Southside is a proud partner of multiple ISPs working in our territory to bring the much needed service of broadband to the rural communities that we serve. We understand the importance of broadband, but we also must remember that safety will always be our #1 priority. We urge this council to consider carefully any potential threats to the safety and reliability of our utility systems. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, sir.
Kyle Allwine, after Kyle, David Lipscomb.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the council. I'm Kyle Allwine, Manager of Public Relations for Northern Neck Electric Cooperative. We strongly oppose this legislation. For us, it's simple. Our mission is to improve the quality of life in our communities and the lives of our 20,000 members. Not only that, but I think that we're not talking about a cost that's important to us more than anything else, and that's the cost or the value of a human life. See, we care not only about those 20,000 homes and businesses, but more importantly, we care about the families inside them. This legislation threatens their safety and the safety of the general public, and that is not acceptable. There are aspects of this proposal that will endanger the watermen, the loggers, the farmers, and the many others that power the economy of the Northern Neck and many other rural regions in Virginia. This legislation not only permits, but encourages and incentivizes these shortcuts of safety. This year, as part of our routine inspection patterns that we do, 1/3 of ISP attachment points do not meet our safety standards. That's 1 out of every 3 poles that you see driving down the street. So I ask you, what is the value or the cost of a human life? What is the value or cost of safety? For us, it's not something that we are willing or able to shortcut. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, council members. My name is David Lipscomb. I am Vice President of Member and Customer Service with Mecklenburg Electric Cooperative and Empower Broadband. And to date, we have partnered quite heavily with DHCD, and we're appreciative of all of the funding that we've been awarded through projects there. To date, we're close to $200 million in total projects, and a significant amount of that has been funded by the state. Now, one of the things that the proposed Make Ready legislation does is it invalidates a lot of the processes, the selection processes that were undergone to select those appropriate or most cost-effective projects. You know, and there are existing contracts between counties and regions, electric utilities and ISPs for the body projects like many of us have received funding for. Well, this proposed legislation would undermine those projects. You know, it would invalidate those agreements as this legislation is written. Now, the legislation rewards ISPs that simply underestimated or left out, but they simply underbid the cost of the body projects, and requesting reimbursement or changes to that sets a very dangerous precedent. And it is really wasteful of both state and federal dollars that have already been put into these projects. You know, companies that have a hard time attaching airily could do what we've done at Empower, and that is to go back and take a look at an underground option. You know, when we first started out on our projects, the initial initiatives had 70% of our facilities going on the pole. But at this point, we have switched that. There's about 70% of the attachments that we have are now put underground. It's more cost effective. It's more timeliness effective. It helps us to maintain those goals and maintain those timelines that are in place. You know, one solution that is really not the answer here is to shift the cost of added construction to a rural ratepayer and see the rural ratepayer in Southside Virginia, one of the most struggling regions in the state, to see that those members see significant rises and increases in their electric rates. You know, and it's is a that shortfall shouldn't be put on the backs of rural ratepayers. You know, and it should not fund a windfall to ISPs who are mismanaging and are not taking advantage of all the opportunities that are there. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other?
Madam Chair, that concludes the written sign up. Should we offer
Okay.
folks
Yes,
online?
sir. Yes.
If anyone's online, please unmute yourself. Apologies. Unmute yourself. 3-minute time limit for public comments. Last call for anyone online. Please unmute yourself and begin speaking. I think that concludes public comment. Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Chandler. So, do any members of the body have any new business to bring up today?
Madam Chair, I would like to raise an issue.
Right.
I think I highlighted this at the last Broadband Advisory Council that there was a ISP who received a grant to build broadband and was working in conjunction with one of the state agencies. Unfortunately, I have to report it did not work out well. And so I think it'd be important for the council to look at the topic of grant funds being distributed to a locality and ISP, and then any state agency or local government who rightly may need to do a construction project, but damaging or destroying an investment of broadband, and then handing the bill over to an ISP for that cost. So I think as we are all now going to be receiving these grant funds coming out, this could be a looming issue of significant concern to everyone if this practice continues.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we're all concerned about that and duly noted. Are there other issues? Steve?
Thank you. Just 2 items. One is a lot of discussion about this proposed bill, but a lot of what I didn't hear was relative to timing. I thought that was really the issue we were trying to accomplish, is the amount of time it was taking to get make-ready approvals. In my locality, I don't have co-ops, so I don't have this issue. We do have, American Electric Power, and I think part of the discussion with our ISPs has been we're willing to pay the cost, even willing to pay for a third party, but it's the time that it was taking to get those reviews done. So I don't know if this bill is going to address the time. It seemed like everything was about cost, but that's not, at least in my experience, I hadn't heard anything about defraying the cost or trying to push the cost off on the co-ops. I thought it was really trying to get to the timing issue of the reviews. And so hopefully, maybe as the discussions continue, maybe they can get more into that issue of the actual timing it's taking to get permits approved and get the ISPs moving. So, and then the other item, I'll just reiterate a concern I brought up last time about looking forward. Hopefully that body can somehow start to address cellular deployment across the Commonwealth. For Franklin County, for example, there are still many areas that will have wireline internet service, but still do not have cell service. And so we have a challenge, and I don't think we're alone in the Commonwealth. There's probably some areas even around Richmond that still don't have adequate cellular service. And so as we move forward with VODI and hopefully households are connected, hopefully maybe we can look a little more forward into those handheld devices as well, and making sure that people have those broadband options through cellular as well. So I don't know exactly what that looks like, but kind of my initial thought was maybe a percentage of the VODI funds could be allocated towards something to help kind of further cellular deployment, especially in those rural areas where it's just same as the broadband. It's hard for the companies to go there, maybe without a little bit of incentive. So I'll keep tooting that horn a little bit as we move forward. But I think that's an important thing as we move forward with VODI.
Thank you so much. Are there other comments, new issues for anyone else? One thing that I want to make certain is that we preserve our funding at the state level, that we, if you look at the budget proposed by the administration, I will just say for the record, I have some concerns that we want to make sure that we are getting all of our work done before we start cutting the budget on body grants. And I thank everybody for being here today and for sharing your comments and your public concerns. I think that conversations are going to need to continue through the session to make sure that we try to find peace in the valley. We do have a timeline that is very tight, that we risk losing the federal dollars. And so I think it's imperative for all of the stakeholders to sit down together from varying points of view to work this out, because this is so important to the people of Virginia. And this is really a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to have this level of funding for these projects. Dr. Holm?
So I just have an announcement before we adjourn this morning. It's still morning. The Fiber Broadband Association is the Regional Fiber Conference will actually be in Richmond next month. And so I just wanted to let everyone know. And actually Cass Rasnick, who is our federal program officer for NTIA, will actually be doing the keynote speech, and I'll be on a fireside chat to discuss the progress in the Commonwealth. And so I just want to let everyone know that Richmond will be the location for the Fiber Broadband Association regional conversation. And so that'll be actually at the Omni Hotel. And I'm pretty sure they're sharing the information, but we'll also share it as well.
Thank you so much. Well, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Is there a second? All righty, so moved. Thank you all for your time. We're looking forward to a good session.